So tell me a little bit though. How did you get started in this? What made you want to do sketches of all things?
Yeah. So let me go back a bit further how I got to doing the AI image generation. So I'm a creative developer, which means I'm like a web developer, but I also do some stuff on the side like animation and sometimes a bit of illustration and stuff like that. So I like to be creative and I like to do some development too. And like a couple of years ago, I think it's 2021, I discovered like the first version of DALI. And it was like some magical new technology because it was a long time since I saw something that felt like magic when you're looking at technology, and DALI felt like magic to me. So I tried to generate some images in DALI, and what the first thing that struck me was that it was quite magical, but the quality was pretty low still. So it was felt more like a gimmick because you felt very limited on what you could do with it. But then Midjourney came and the quality took a big step up in making very cool images. And then Stable Diffusion came, and Stable Diffusion was like the open source version of all this stuff. And that really interested me because there were no limitations to it. You could tinker with everything, and you could install add-ons, and you could run it on your own hardware. And that was very cool because you didn't have to pay and you could generate like thousands of images. So the sky was a limit. So first I started doing things with Dreamboot where I trained on like images of myself or of people that I knew to create these fantastical portraits and stuff like that. But then like a couple of months after Stable Diffusion was released, I think, or half a year later or something, like the ControlNet add-on came out. And that was like eye-opening in the sense that in the beginning, it was like just prompting via text or like one input image where it would take all kinds of information from the image that wasn't really transparent what it was taking from the image. And with ControlNet, you could finally start having actual control over your output images in the sense that you could like take an image and you could say, okay, take the pose from this image, just the pose, ignore the colors, ignore the contrast, ignore the style, whatever, just take the pose and do something with that in addition to like a textual description. And another cool thing that you could do was like take sketches, line art, and you could use that as a base for your reconstructions. And that seemed really cool to me because I'm a bit of an amateur illustrator myself and never done anything big with it, but I went to like arts academy and next to my normal schooling, and it was fun to do doodle things, and I like to draw superheroes and stuff like that when I was younger. So, but I never became such a good artist that I would be like a professional artist that would be hired for comic books or whatever, or concept art. But I did like to doodle, and I was like an above average doodler, I would say. And all of a sudden, this ControlNet add-on to Stable Diffusion, it allowed me to create some fantastically high quality images that were still based on the sketches that I did myself. So I could draw something up like a rough sketch, and then I could turn it into a very highly detailed, very professionally rendered illustration that I didn't have the skill to do myself from scratch. And so that was very interesting, and I started to take my own sketches and turn them into realistic or detailed rendered images. And I also started taking sketches from other people, turned them into realistic images with their approval, of course. And even like kids' drawings, like drawings from kids that of my friends' kids, and I turned them into something that's way better than they did it. And that was really fun to do. And then all of a sudden we were walking outside and we were having a conversation, and all of a sudden the topic of like police sketches came up in conversation. And like I had this aha moment, a light bulb went up in my head, was like, all right, this is like a great source for very strange sketches and funny sketches and interesting sketches that have a backstory. So that will be like a great source material for this whole control net Stable Diffusion experiment. So at first I was like, okay, I had these really bad, really funny composite sketches in mind. You often see like these blog posts, like the 10 funniest composite sketches, and you see these horrible drawings that look nothing like a real person. And I was like, oh, it seems very cool to me to see, like, to ask the hypothetical question, like, what if this very bad sketch looked exactly like the real person? What would that real person look like? So I was trying to answer that question with my images. So that's how I started doing the composite sketches.
Oh, wow. Man, that was a lot. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's good. So would you say you started, what do you do like professionally? You make websites?
Yeah, I'm a creative developer. So I do like 80% web development coding. That's like front end, back end, like writing code. And there's designers that make the designs. I take those designs and I make actual websites. So I write PHP code and JavaScript code, HTML, CSS, stuff like that. And besides that, I do some motion designing, so I can use After Effects, which is useful for the videos I create for the AI Witness report. So I use some of my skill as a creative developer in this project, but the AI parts that weren't really a factor in my job. Unless you have to like ChatGPT. We do use quite some ChatGPT. I try to introduce like image generation tools at my job too. So we have a lot of designers and we have people that make artwork, and we have photographers and stuff like that. So the image generation tools are very handy in my line of work. And so I try to educate my colleagues a bit of the possibilities of what's possible and what's hard to do still in AI. And I see that they're more and more using the tools. A lot of my colleagues use ChatGPT for a lot of stuff, and they also use a lot of Midjourney. And when they want to generate something that's too difficult to generate in a text prompt on Midjourney, for example, they often come to me, and I try to use what I learned with the AI Witness Report project, and I use my knowledge to create like very specific images that they can use like for mock-ups or when they have to pitch an idea to clients, because often they have these wild ideas like, oh, we want to do something with this and that influencer or this and that celebrity, and we have to build a lot of stuff for that, or we have to be in a very specific location. But if you want to pitch that and you just have like a crappy sketch and like a textual description with that, it's hard to sell it to a client. But if you have like an image that looks like 90% like what the final result is going to be like, it's much easier to sell it to a client.
When you started with Stable Diffusion, where did you learn all of this stuff? Like, how long did it take you?
Oh, wow. Well, I just learned by doing it and by watching a lot of tutorials on YouTube. Like YouTube is such a good source for this kind of stuff. And I'm a lot on the Stable Diffusion subreddit. So on the subreddit, they share lots of techniques and like new add-ons, and like the cool stuff bubbles up, you know. I don't look at, and I don't research the stuff like every day, but if like an add-on for Stable Diffusion is really good, you will start to notice a lot of people posting about it, and then I'll watch like a YouTube tutorial how to set it up, and then I start like experimenting. It's like a lot of experimenting that I do. Yeah.
Okay, so how long did this take you to kind of arrive to where your Instagram quality of images are now? How long did that take you to come to that level of quality?
Yeah, I think I'm not very sure how much the quality from the first sketch to the last one that I did, how much it has evolved, because I'm really in it, and it's hard to see from a distance if the quality has really gotten any better. But I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so the first sketch that I did, I wanted to be as good as possible. So I spent a lot of time on it, and I was like, okay, I spent now like about 10 hours in this sketch. But in my mind, I was like, okay, the first time it's going to be very difficult, but if I do like 10 of these, it's going to be like an hour top, and I can like shit them out one after another, and I have like an Instagram full of interesting images. But in reality, my bar just gets set higher and higher, and even now I spend like at least 6, 7, 8 hours on every image, because it's
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, you have to look for the sketch, and then often the sketches are very low quality. They get shared on a lot of websites, like lots of news sites, but the resolution is very low. So first thing is I have to find like a high resolution version of the sketch. Then after like half an hour searching, I often don't find it. So I upscale it myself in Photoshop, and I start drawing over it. So I redraw the whole sketch, and I leave out all the JPEG artifacts and all the extra little lines that don't really make sense in the sketch, because the Stable Diffusion control net, it finds it hard to distinct like which line is important and which line is not important. So every little crosshatch shadow line, it's going to try to interpret as something. And if you have like crosshatch shadowing on the face, it's going to interpret it like zits or scratches or whatever. So I clean up the whole line art, so I have a clean base. Then I have to pick the right model, put in Stable Diffusion. I start generating using a fitting description. And then the first images that come out, often they look like 60% there. So it can be very fast, but it's not there all the way. So then I start generating more and more and more. I start tweaking the sketch. I start seeing like, oh, it tends to interpret this little line in the sketch as something wrong. So I remove the line, or I make some lines thicker and stuff like that. I tweak the description. I tweak like all the parameters. There's like 20 parameters I have to tweak. So I generate until I get something that's like 80% there. And then start in painting like, everything looks fine, but his shirt shouldn't be white, it should be black. So I in-paint the shirt. Or his nose, it's like not crooked enough, and I in-paint the nose, in-paint the eyes, until I get like 90, 95%, and I upscale it, do some more in-painting. Then I take it into Photoshop, and then I overlay the original sketch, and I nudge the whole thing into place so that it lines up exactly with the sketch. And even then, I have to do some in-painting in Photoshop. So I use the generative fill in Photoshop to like remove some marks that I don't think that should be there, or maybe give different pupils or different eye color. Those last finishing steps I do in Photoshop. So that whole process takes me about 8 hours.
Wow. That's quite the process. Now, how do you, I guess you kind of laid it out for us, but what are you doing to clean up? Like what goes into the process of cleaning up? Are you using certain tools, Photoshop? What are we using?
I use Photoshop. So I put the original sketch on a bottom layer. I make it like half transparent, so I can draw over it. I add a new layer on top of it, and I start like reinterpreting the lines, and I remove all the fluff and all the shading and stuff like that doesn't seem that I think that's going to hinder the generation of the images. And it's like most of the time, at least with the last 10, 20 sketches, I like drew over to trace the whole original sketch from scratch. And
okay.
Yeah. That's about it.
And so how long does it take you just to prep a single image? Just the cleanup?
That depends on how good the original sketch is and how long I have to look for like a higher resolution version of it and stuff like that. But it takes about, I think, half an hour to an hour.
Okay. And so we go from cleanup to choosing the model. How do you know what model to use. Are we using SDXL, Automatic 1111, Comfy UI? Like, what's your process?
So the software that I use is the Automatic 1111 interface, and I've used quite a few models as a base, but the last like 10 to 15 images, I guess, have been mostly done with I Can't Believe It's Not Photography. So the name is I Can't Believe It's Not Photography, and it's a model based on 1.5. And I always use 1.5 based models because the ControlNet line art model isn't ready yet for SDXL. So as soon as there is a good ControlNet line art model for SDXL, I'm probably going to experiment with that. There have been some attempts to make it, but the ones that I tried, they aren't as good as the 1.5. Or I haven't found the exact parameters to make it look good, but it doesn't really listen to my input. And
Okay.
I tried like a couple of hours to make it work in SDXL, and it didn't work. And I was like, why am I trying to force SDXL? Why don't I just use the older version SD 1.5? And that seemed to work out better. And then, there are some specific parameters that I use, like the sampling method is DPM++ 3M SDE Keras. I don't know what the hell it means, but it's the one that gives me the best results, And it's just by trying everything out that I found these parameters that work for me, but I'm not an expert in, like, I don't even know what the hell DPM 33++ 3M SDE Keras stands for exactly. I've read it like one time, I forgot it immediately, but it seems to work, so I keep using that. And every now and then I look at these websites where you can download new models, and I find new models that are like, oh, that's an interesting one, like the one that you sent, the one that you suggested that I should use or that I should try out. And I tried that one out, and it's like, oh, the results are okay, but they don't always work well with ControlNet. So these custom models, they are trained on different image sets, and sometimes they are trained on a very specific type of photography or a specific ethnicity, or sometimes like they're trained on Asian people, for example. And if you have a model that's very biased towards a certain type of person, the output tends to be biased to that type of person too. So I'm looking for a model that's very broad and that's very flexible, and that listens well to ControlNet. And for me, I Can't Believe It's Not Photography is one of the better ones.
Okay. And you're upscaling all of your images?
Yeah. So first to quite low resolution. They're larger than 512 by 512, but they're not that much larger. And then I upscale them through Stable Diffusion. I use the Ultimate Upscale. I don't know what it's called. Ultimate SD Upscale, I think it's called. So I upscale them times 2, and then I try to upscale them again times 2. But it doesn't always give the best results. So it tends to remove like little details from the face, like skin pores and little hairs and stuff like that, and makes everything more like gloomy. So what I often do is I first upscale them in Stable Diffusion, and after that I upscale them again in Photoshop, which doesn't have that good of upscaling, but it doesn't make up new details, and it tends to not remove the details in the face that I still like. There's this neural filter in Photoshop called Super Zoom, and I often use that for like a second upscaling. It does a pretty good job. I think it is based on AI, on some AI algorithm, and it's not perfect, but it does a good job.
Have you tried Topaz at all for upscaling or restoring any detail?
No, I heard of it a lot, and I also recommended it at work, I guess, for people to use that need fast and easy upscaling. But I haven't used it yet because the tools that I have seem to be decent enough. But I'm willing to try it out. Also, the reason because like Stable Diffusion is free and I already have Photoshop, so I tend to use the tools that are available and free for me to use. But yeah, Topaz is probably better for upscaling.
I got you. What else? Okay, so it's funny. I think we use the same sampling method.
Ah,
Yeah,
you mean the
that's what
DPM++ 3M SDE Caras?
Yeah. I think we use
That's a
the
good
same
one.
thing.
Great minds think alike.
Yes, sir. Okay, so you gave us the story of how you kind of went with the sketches.
Hmm.
Now, do you worry, because I've tried doing sketches before too because I thought it looked fun. I posted it a couple of different places. I don't think it was Reddit. I think it was just some Discords. People lit me up. They did not like it. They said this is super unethical. This is not right to do. Have you had any kind of backlash like that?
Yeah. Well, I think probably the sketches that you did you make photorealistic versions of them or did you did like artistic versions of them?
They were photorealistic.
Photorealistic.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I did have some backlash from it. But there are like a couple of ethical things ethical pitfalls, I think, that are in my project. So first of all, it's not fully transparent on what image databases that the custom checkpoints are based on. So like if you take like an official SD 1.5 or whatever, there is some transparency on what that is based on. But if you use a custom model like I do and you do too, probably, it is based on images that we don't really know the origin of. And it is based on artists' work. It is based on real people. And first of all, you have the fact that like if you do like non-photorealistic images and you try to make a specific style in them, people can say like, oh, you're just stealing the skill and the hard work from this well-known artist and you're trying to sell it as being your own. And it diminishes the hard work that the original artist did in creating the style. They work like decennia to create a style. They draw every day and stuff like that. And I 100% get that. And I also think that's quite unethical. So, but if you're talking about photorealistic images, I think there the artistic style is a bit less of an issue because you're trying to attain photorealism, and photorealism, you can't copyright that because nobody owns photorealism, you know. But there's always the chance that you like inadvertently mimic the style of a specific photographer because the images are based on photographs made by photographers. So there's a risk in that. But unless you're using a checkpoint that's totally based on one photographer's photorealistic images, I think it's such a mixture of realistic images that I don't really think that you can like say like, oh, it looks too much like that photographer. But then in my specific case for the AI Witness report project, there are other ethical issues in the sense that I'm taking a very vague sketch that is based on like a vague memory of a witness that is then interpreted by the forensic experts. There's extra noise added to it inadvertently, and you get a sketch that is often very vague and often not good at all in the sense that it's just badly drawn from a technical standpoint. I've seen often that these forensic artists, there are some that are very good, but there are also some that are very bad at drawing, and they just draw these like anatomically incorrect monstrosities. And I think in those cases, it may be a lot better to leave it as a sketch because the sketch is vague too, just as the witness's memory is vague. And if you have like a vague sketch, nobody expects the actual person, the culprit or the victim or whatever, to look exactly like that horrible sketch, you know? They know like, oh, so it's a guy with a big nose and a mustache. Okay, do I know a guy with a big nose and a mustache that was in the vicinity of the crime? And that's how you get like tips. That's how they if maybe can identify the person. But if you turn that horrible sketch into a photorealistic version, people see the photorealistic version and they're like, oh, so the person or like the culprit looks exactly like this photorealistic version. So they're going to start looking for somebody that looks exactly like it. And it may happen that there's a person that has nothing to do with that crime that looks like this version, this realistic version, and the people might say, oh, you look like this photorealistic version. It must be you, because AI, which is very highly advanced technology, has deemed that it is you because it looks exactly like you. So that's a big risk. Another risk is that my version looks nothing like the real person, and so they're gonna write off the actual person. It can't be him because he doesn't look like this highly detailed photorealistic version of the culprit. So I think in that sense, the vague sketch is probably often better, and it may be unethical to push the realistic version as like, oh, you have to look for somebody that looks exactly like this. I think there are some cases where my photorealistic version may improve the chances of finding the person a bit, but that is if you have good eyewitnesses that are good at describing the person that they saw, and if you have like good forensic artists that know what you're doing, that know what to ask the witnesses, and that are good in translating this knowledge into a sketch. So if you have a very good sketch, maybe there's a very tiny chance that like my realistic version triggers recognition in somebody that wasn't triggered by the original sketch, or maybe they haven't seen the sketch, but they did see my realistic interpretation of it, and they also see the sketch next to it, and they're like, starting, oh yeah, I know a guy that looks like that. But then the original sketch has to be very good. Another case where I think that maybe there's a very tiny chance that my realistic image can be an improvement is when we're talking about unidentified victims, unidentified bodies, because they have the body in front of them, and if you have a good forensic artist, I think they can do a good interpretation of the body. They don't want to show pictures of the actual body because often it is bloated, or there are parts of the face missing and stuff like that, or it's just a part of a skull, and it's, well, I can imagine why they don't just distribute these images to ask for people if they recognize them. And if you have like a good forensic artist that can do a good reconstruction of it, then maybe my realistic version can trigger a recognition in somebody who knew the victim. Who knows? But the chances are very slim. But so going back to the ethical considerations, I understand why people get up in a tiffy about this whole thing. I have a lot of respect for artists. Without these artists, we would have never gotten something like Midjourney. We would have never gotten this AI image generation stuff that could make like beautiful artistic images. And if we don't respect the artists enough, and if we just focus fully on AI tools, I think the artists are gonna, go away, and we don't have any new, not go away, but we have less and less new material, and also less material for the AI to be trained on. So we need artists, we need skilled people.
So with all of that said, have you been approached by anybody regarding your previous creations with your realistic sketch to real life, like the police or anything like that, or any law enforcement talking to you about, hey, maybe you can kind of come in here and help kind of bring this witness's vision to real life?
Yeah.
Has anyone approached you?
There are some of those cases. So there was a private investigator from the U.S. They had a homicide happening somewhere. I'm not sure the state or city, and they created a sketch, and the sketch wasn't very good. It looked a bit goofy, but he asked me to do a photorealistic reconstruction of it. So I did, but I gave him the whole context. I said like, okay, just to be sure, don't just distribute this as being like, oh, this is the guy that we're looking for. Talk to the active police that are researching the thing. You can suggest that they might they're allowed to use my version of it, but be sure to give people context and to tell them about the caveats on this realistic reconstruction. So this guy, this private investigator, he was an ex-police chief, and he asked me to do the reconstruction. He sent it over to the active police chief, or the active team that's researching at the police. But the police office was like flooded with like 6 other homicides around that week. I don't know what's happening over there, but they haven't really gotten back to us yet.
When was that?
That was like a month ago or something. I asked the private investigator if I could release the reconstruction that I did, and he gave me permission, but I wasn't allowed to, or he asked me not to name the location of where that happened, or any names of the victims and stuff like that. But you can find the reconstruction on my website, and you can probably do reverse image search and find out what the actual case was. So
Okay.
there's that one. Then there's this Belgian, I'm from Belgium, by the way, if that wasn't clear. There's this Belgian investigative journalist that started following me on Instagram a couple of months ago. And he all of a sudden sent me a message asking me if I could take a look and do a reconstruction of a composite sketch that was doing the rounds in Belgium, of a case where there was a Belgian lawyer that was a female Belgian lawyer that was killed in her own home, I believe, and the son of the victim chased the guy out of the house, or he chased after him, and he was also shot by the culprit, and the guy got away. So the son of the victim, he helped the forensic artist make a composite sketch, and the investigative journalist asked me to do like my realistic interpretation, because the case was going on for weeks now. They found a couple of possible suspects, but they had to let them go because there was no proof that they had anything to do with the case. So it's turning into a bit of a cold case, and the journalist was like, oh, maybe it can help. So I did. The funny thing was I already made a reconstruction of that sketch because it was big news in Belgium. So I already did a reconstruction. I sent it over to the journalist, and he is now trying to get in contact with the eyewitness, that's the son of the victim, and he's trying to find out if he thinks that my realistic version looks like the person that he saw. But that has been a couple of weeks now, and I haven't really heard of him, or at least a week. So I don't know if I'm gonna hear anything from them. There's also been like a true crime podcast maker from the US that asked me to do some aged reconstructions on a fugitive that they're doing a show on. But I can't go into any details there about who it is exactly. And then there was this professor at a Belgian university that asked me to do a reconstruction of like a gang member from like a famous Belgian gang in the 80s. And he asked me to do a reconstruction of him. I asked for more information about more information about the suspect, but he hasn't gotten in touch yet. And I think that are about those are the requested things from journalists and police that came to me.
So it seems like what you're doing hopefully will help people in the long run. Is that kind of the goal? What's the goal of doing these? Is it just fun? Is it to help people? What is it?
Yeah, so mainly it was for entertainment and for me to learn these tools. So that was my main goal in the whole project. In the beginning, it was like, oh, let's make fun of these bad police sketches. So it was never meant to actually help in the cases, not because I didn't want to help, but more like I didn't believe in the fact that my realistic version would help. Because I'm like, a vague sketch is probably be better because of all the reasons that I mentioned before. Now I'm still doing it for entertainment purposes, but there is like a tiny voice in the back of my head that's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it could actually help in a case? And I still don't really believe that I can per se, but I do think that it would be really cool if there's like a tiny chance that I can maybe help, that one of my images, even if one of my images just puts the spotlight back on the original sketch and a person that sees my image and the sketch next to it triggers something in their brain and they come up with like a very good clue as to who the person is, that would be very nice, but it's a bit of a fantasy.
Well, yeah, I remember now. Do you think that AI will eventually replace traditional police sketches with trying to find the perp?
That's a very good question. I think it's more likely that DNA in combination with AI is going to solve cases. I heard that what they're doing now, I haven't seen I haven't seen like the actual article about it, but what I heard through my father was that they're now like using a database of images of people in combination with their DNA to create like an AI model where they can take the DNA of a suspect, put it through the database, and they can predict from what they know of other images of people and their DNA what this person looks like. And so they now had a database of like a couple of thousand images of people and their DNA that they can use to like match the DNA of the suspect. But imagine if you have like 10,000s of people and their DNA, I think that the results are going to be even better. But there's also, of course, a lot of ethical issues with with sourcing people's images and DNA, and I think it can be used for horrible things too. So I'm not sure how far that they're going to go with that. And I do think that when these databases, these checkpoints grow even more and more and use more and more images of people that are have even better descriptions and stuff like that, I think that you can maybe use AI to do like composites, but they have to make sure that the databases are as unbiased as possible. And because if you train it, for example, on a specific type of person, you get the results will be more of that type of person. And it has to be as unbiased as possible, and that's a very difficult thing to do. I think the traditional composite sketches aren't going away that fast. Maybe in like 5 to 10 years or something. Not sure.
Well, that's still a decent amount of time before the robots take over.
Yeah.
And I did want to ask you about the technical side of Stable Diffusion, like your prompting, your negative prompts. How are you coming up with all of those, just all of your settings? Do you have a very specific set of negative prompts and positive? Is it anything custom models?
Um, I try to copy paste what I did on the previous ones. I don't. There are like negative prompts that are like these embeddings, textual embeddings that you can use. They're like a whole bunch of negative prompts meshed together, or positive prompts. But I tend not to use any textual embeddings. I just type my own stuff, and I don't use a lot of negative prompts. So what I do often use in the negative prompt is things like sketch, illustration, CGI, symmetrical, beautiful, stuff like that, naked, bare-chested. So things I don't want in the image. But it's very simple. It's not this huge string of negative prompts. And I start generating with also quite a simple positive prompt. So most of the time it's like a raw, highly detailed photo of man standing in front of wall, 50 years old, gray mustache, blue sweater. And then I type some things that I found on Reddit that people say that try to help the image quality, like 8K, UHD, highly detailed, stuff like that. Like a couple of those magical words sprinkled on top, of which people say that they make the image look more high quality.
Does the order of the keywords matter that you found?
Yeah, it does matter. If you put things in the front, it listens to it more. If you put things in the back, it listens less to it. And you can also, I also use like, you can emphasize certain keywords or de-emphasize it by like typing like a number behind it. And at first I try to keep my positive and negative prompts really simple. And then I add more and more as I generate images, and I try to tweak it to be more and more to what I want. But it's not like that I have a very rigid or strict process in that. It's just like more gut feeling based.
Are you using control nets a lot other than OpenPose?
No, so I use the line art model for my sketches. That's the one I used most. And besides the line art one, I think the second most used one is the tile control net, because that is used in the Ultimate SD upscale add-on. So the tile control net makes sure that the upscaled image looks a lot like the original image, and it separates the image into tiles. I don't know the exact technical way that it works, but in the end, it allows me with like a decent video card, but not like a super high-end video card, to upscale images to pretty high resolution and still keeping like true to the original image.
What GPU are you using?
I'm using NVIDIA 2080 Ti that I bought secondhand, specifically for Stable Diffusion. It's not the best because it's like 11 gigabytes of RAM memory, and the newer models, and like if you want to do like video generation and stuff like that, they're talking about like, oh, you need 24 gigabytes of video memory. I don't have money for that, and the AI witness report doesn't make me any money whatsoever, so it's not gonna happen for me in the near future, I guess. But like a couple of days ago, Stable Diffusion or Stability AI, the team behind Stable Diffusion, announced that they have like a video model too. So you can do text to video or video to video. I'm not sure, but you need like 20 gigs of video RAM at least. So it's not in the cards for me yet.
So with your GPU, you're being limited in terms of the quality of your output?
Yeah, so I'm limited in the resolution that I can create from scratch. Now, the upscaling does help, and it's pretty okay, but the original resolution that I can output It's quite low because of my VRAM. And there are also some other limitations. For example, with 11 gigs of VRAM, it's difficult to train like custom LoRa's or custom checkpoints on SDXL. I think it's very hard to do. Maybe you can do like a gazillion optimizations and then wait a couple of hours, but I don't have the patience for that. So I keep with the older
Fair enough.
versions.
What kind of sampling steps are you using?
I try to, most of the time it's like around 24 to 32 sampling steps. That seems to be more than enough to get like high quality and highly detailed images. And I think it's mostly thanks to the sampling method, the long thing that we mentioned earlier. It's a pretty new one and it works pretty well at the low step count. In the earlier days, you had to do a lot more steps to get high quality images.
Let's say I'm somebody that is just getting into Stable Diffusion. I know nothing of it. Where can I learn more, would you think, that helped you? What kind of resources did you use? Just Google it, just YouTube it?
Yeah, so I think mainly like the Stable Diffusion subreddit, that's a great source of information. And then there are a lot of good YouTubers that do Stable Diffusion. I'm gonna look some names up because I don't know them from memory. But okay, so the first guy that comes to mind is Olivio Sarikas. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I learned a lot from his videos. Then there's the Nerdy Rodent. I've seen a lot of his videos too. And those are like the guys that I learned a lot from. There's another guy, but he is more general AI technology stuff and technology in general. It's called 2 Minute Papers. I don't know if you ever heard of him. So it's this guy that does like really summarized, easy to follow summaries of papers in the technological space. And I learned a lot from him. He has a good way of teasing these new technologies and making you want to try them out. So that's a good source too if you want to get inspired.
Do you have any tips personally from things you've learned that you might not have learned from a tutorial on YouTube that you could share with anybody?
Yeah, I think what I learned is that I should maybe go into like in painting and stuff earlier, because at first it's nice the idea to like write a prompt and you get a perfect image from it, but it's often easier to try to create an image that's like 80% there and do in painting, like, oh, it's almost there, but I'm not gonna generate a whole new image. I'm just gonna select eyes and I want to see different eyes. And then don't try to do everything in Stable Diffusion, because if it's like 95% there, just take it into Photoshop and then you can really push and pull every pixel to be in the exact space that you want it to be. And use a lot of tools that I think it's also a good thing to use a lot of tools and use them for their strong sides. For example, the new DALL-E that has been released like a month ago or a couple of months ago. It's very good at interpreting textual prompts and even very difficult textual prompts. So you can write a very complex prompt and you can describe multiple characters in it, and you can describe the background and you could describe multiple colors. And it's pretty good at interpreting it. I think it uses ChatGPT in the background or something to turn your prompt into something very easy to understand for the image generation. And if I want to try to make a complex image, I often start with DALL-E 3, for example, through Bing image generator that uses DALL-E 3. And then you get a base image. And then you can take that base image, you can upscale it in Stable Diffusion and start in painting or replacing faces with Stable Diffusion to make them more photorealistic, for example. Sometimes I start using Midjourney because it has like a often very professional looking images, very studio quality images. And I start using with Midjourney, but then often the faces in Midjourney aren't very detailed and a bit painterly, or they looked a bit airbrushed. And then I take them into Stable Diffusion and I replace the face with a more realistic, more highly detailed face in Stable Diffusion. So I would say don't focus on one tool, because all the tools are still very new and they have all their good sides, they have their bad sides, and they have their pluses and minuses. And use the tools and what they're good at and combine them all together to get like fantastically high detailed results that are exactly like the thing that you want to make.
AI Witness Report on Instagram. Where else can we find you?
So the ai.witness.report.com website has all the links to all my social media accounts. You also find me on TikTok. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. I was almost kicked off Facebook because I tried to post on a page about my project on some true crime group. And I tried to do it multiple times, and I always get these strange reports like, oh, the Facebook cybersecurity team has deemed your post to be inappropriate because you're trying to steal people's identification, or you're trying to steal people info and trying to scam them. So I had 3 strikes, and now the automatic system is threatening to remove my page from Facebook. So maybe not Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, etc.
Man, I appreciate you coming on. This was cool.
It was fun to do. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, of course, man. Hopefully we can talk again about some more nerdy things and more settings and all that stuff.
If you find anything cool, just send it over and I'll do the same.
Cool, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.